Hey, Danny.
After watching and reviewing the first season of the original Law & Order, I was curious what Season 2 has in store for us. Would its sophomore year hold up as well as the freshman season? And are there any differences in the setup? Hi there, it's Micha. Stay with me for a bit and I will let you know. Let me start with something I don't consider a spoiler, as it happens directly after the iconic in the first 2 minutes of the very first episode of Season 2. However, if you haven't seen Season 1 yet, you might want to stop watching this review now, so consider yourself warned. Okay, I expected a lot of cast changes in a show that is currently in its 23rd season, but I didn't think it would happen that soon. I knew immediately that something was wrong when the episode started by showing us the main cast members instead of some random characters finding a body or witness a crime. We are instead reacquainted with junior detective Mike Logan, played by Chris Noth, and his boss Captain Donald Cragen, portrayed by Dan Florrick, as they discuss a court case with Richard Brooks in his role as Assistant District Attorney Paul Robinette. That case required a testimony from Senior Detective Sergeant Max Greevy, who is supposed to be back from time off the next day. Cut to him arriving home, but you only see him from a distance, making it crystal clear that he is about to be killed off, which happened while Logan is on the phone with Max's wife.
Oh, Mary, Mother of God!
Marie! Marie!
To help investigate the murder, Phil Serretta, played by Paul Savino, is brought in as a new senior detective sergeant, replacing George Zunza in the main cast. The first episode is also about the aftermath of the killing and how everyone deals with it.
So, what? How you doing with this?
Most impacted, of course, is Mike, who lost his partner,
2 in the back, 1 in the face.
won't accept help from the department's psychiatrist,
Listen, thanks a lot, but really I'm fine.
and will cross several lines to solve the case, which actually creates more problems than solves them.
On your head!
At the end of the episode, he has worked through his loss
Maybe life wasn't enough of a sentence.
That's what the law allows. I can live with it.
and the show continues with Phil as his new partner in the same format as before, with a case that will be investigated by the cops in the first half of the episode, before the district attorneys take over to bring the culprits to justice. As Paul Savino is the only new addition to the team, this season's cast is completed by returning actors Michael Moriarty as Executive Assistant District Attorney Ben Stone and Stephen Hill as his boss, District Attorney Adam Schiff. And this closes our synopsis. What I just realized though is how much of a sausage fest this cast is. I didn't spoil myself by looking up how the cast will change over time, but I'm curious when the first woman will be joining the main cast. But let's get into this season now. It was like the previous one remastered in HD, which helped it to not look dated visually. Also, as before, their cases remain to be as relevant today as they were back in the early 90s. Of course, there are still some small giveaways showing us that it was filmed decades ago, with the biggest remaining the use of payphones instead of cell phones. Well, and also the computers are looking quite archaic. But mostly you're only reminded of its production time when past dates are mentioned in the plot, like something happened in 1985. And you need to shortly reflect on how long ago that is in the context of a show. Regarding the departure of George Zunza, as far as I could find out, he was cast early on for season 1, when it was still supposed to be filmed and to take place in LA. However, shortly before filming began, creator Dick Wolf moved the location to New York. Now George had to relocate for the shoot, being separated from his family for most of a year. After a successful first season, he had to decide if he wants to keep going like this, or if his family had to relocate as well. He didn't want to do either, so he asked to be written out of a show, the way we have seen in the synopsis. A pretty understandable decision. However, as he didn't even have a short appearance in the second season, I assume that the producers weren't that happy and that the split was not really amicable. But what do you know? They did a good job in making his death the center of the first episode for the season and milked it nicely to get a solid arc for Chris Noth out of it. But if I remember correctly, starting from episode 2, he is never mentioned again. So read into it whatever you like. Regarding Logan's story arc, he really lost it for a while and got close to shooting the murderer, ending up forcing a confession at gunpoint.
Please. I did it, okay?
Which of course wasn't admissible in court.
If the first confession is coerced, then so was the second and the third.
While his motivation was understandable, coming out of grief, you can argue if he went too far to continue his job as if nothing happened. Maybe disciplinary action, a demotion or even jail time would have been appropriate, but that was waived. For a 90s crime show, this seems to be a standard procedure, and until recently most shows would have handled it similarly. Overall, I would not consider this a deal breaker, even from today's point of view. However, I wanted to highlight this in case this will make a difference for anyone else interested in watching the show. Like I said in the review for season 1, the cops and attorneys are working by the book in this show. Well, the cops act a little bit more intimidating and in the culprits' faces this year, but nothing violent or illegal. Well, except for Logan's run. Run in with his darker emotions in the season's premiere, which still resulted in the DA not using the unlawful obtained confession.
Was it some stupid technicality?
Perhaps you can explain the concept here, man, so they don't let another cop kill a walk. You know, I doubt if Max Greavy would have considered it a technicality.
By the way, I'm aware that there are a lot of discussions around the show influencing the perception of law enforcement, always showcasing them in a positive light. True, but isn't that what we want reality to look like? And what is the alternative? Alienating the audience by presenting just bad cops? That would be a completely different show. And is it even the job of a TV show to present 100% reality? I think they did a good job giving us positive role models, at least so far. From what I have heard, this may change, with some over-eager cops roughing up suspects in the name of justice, at least in the SVU spin-off. Therefore, I appreciate the depiction in this season, and they did highlight some cases focusing on bad cops along the way. Ultimately, from today's standpoint, however you tackle a procedural show like this, you can't win. So let's just accept the show for what it is and what it wants to be. And what it wants to be is also nicely showcased by fine-tuning the narrative even further, adding some cases that are not so clear-cut morally, forcing the DAs into a compromise here and there. Sometimes guilty parties even walked free due to miscalculations or loopholes in the law, while other times it wasn't even clear to the viewer if the defendant ending up in prison was actually guilty, which kept some endings ambiguous, just like in reality. Another thing that snuck in, somewhere in the middle of this season, were some quips delivered by the detectives, mainly Logan, referring to the case at hand before the opening titles kick in.
Major soap star. Delia Mason on World Without End. My mother watches it. She follows the stories like it happened to the neighbors. Tell your mom she's in for a plot twist.
Something other shows will use a lot in the following years. Like CSI Miami, notoriously. But here they are doing it way more respectful towards the victims. To close the review part, let's have a quick look at this season's most prominent faces in supporting capacity. We have, in early roles, Moira Tierney, way before her stint in ER.
I was Patty Blaine, so I got out before I wasn't.
Comedian Louis Black, whom you most likely know from The Daily Show.
In your new film, was Priscilla Blaine expected to perform sex acts on screen?
Tastefully, yes.
Luis Guzman.
You send those people a message. You put the fear of God into them.
Dylan Baker.
Josh said he'd be at rehearsal that night with good news. He never came to the theater.
NYPD Blues Nicholas Turturro.
The roof's broken, the pool's too hot. In the winter, I'm lucky if I get to Park Avenue South.
Sam Rockwell.
I won't kill anybody.
And the criminally underappreciated Robert Lusardo.
Yeah, the kid, our son, he uses the car when she's out of town.
Then we have, all in their second or third acting credits ever, Grey's Anatomy's Isaiah Washington.
As vice president, I warned Gary. These allegations could damage the fraternity.
Nestor Carbonell from Lost and Bates Motel.
You really want Theta Phi to be a fraternity of rapists?
I saw Gary in the hall. He was sitting down. It's drunk.
Slider star Sabrina Lloyd.
They call me an egg. White on the outside, yellow on the inside.
And The West Wing's Allison Janney.
Weird, weirder, weirdest. These are just the past 3 months.
As well as The Witchblade's Jancy Butler in her first role as an adult, with her only prior credit being a role in the horror movie Savage Weekend 12 years earlier when she was 9 years old.
He was gonna pay for the whole thing and then send her on a cruise off to St. Thomas. Real sport.
And Michelle Trachtenberg in her very first role at age 6, not even being credited in this one.
Claire.
Beside those appearances, let me call out Estelle Harris, who would later play George Costanza's mom in Seinfeld.
Marvin, I can't find it. My payroll man doesn't have it either.
Popping up in a small role just one episode after Jerry Stiller, who would play her husband, making an appearance too.
Prove it. Turn over those transcripts.
There is also Eli Wallach in one of his later roles.
Maybe I'll win the lottery.
And, quite remarkable, Jerry Orbach appears as a defense attorney before being added to the main cast very soon after. In a different role, mind you.
Manslaughter 2. 1 count.
And as in the previous season, it keeps you on your toes regarding the impact and size of their roles, as you may not be sure if they already had their breakthrough at the time of their appearance. And with that being said, let's get to the rating. As with season 1, the topics and style still hold up. The acting is solid and the story is compelling. You may have mixed feelings about Logan handling his partner's murder and the lack of consequences for him crossing several lines, but that is the only larger concern. The style and structure of the episodes is constantly evolving, and as it does, you can clearly see that this show is the blueprint for most police procedurals that followed, which further justifies the series' position in pop culture. Overall, I enjoyed the second season quite a lot. The show again managed to handle many things very well this year, so I am rating it the same way I scored season 1, which means 7.5 out of 10 points. Let's see what the next season will have in store for us. Will there be another change to the main cast? I will find out soon and share my thoughts on that. What about you? Are you a fan of a show, have never watched it, or are currently revisiting it? Do you agree that the show stood the test of time so far? What are your thoughts on the show's positive depiction of law enforcement? Whatever you like to share, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share or subscribe. So much for now, see you next time and thanks for watching. Played by Chris Noth and his boss. Like something happened in 2085. This may change, with some over-eager cops roughing up suspects in the name of justice. And they did highlight some cases focusing on